Donald Cardoso Barron, spiritual master teacher, father of a divine rainbow child Nellie Belen.
What is the Shroud of Turin? Many of the faithful sincerely believe that the Shroud of Turin is the actual burial cloth of our Lord, Jesus Christ. Without declaring its authenticity, Pope John Paul II has clearly attested to the value of the shroud. For instance, in 1980, the Holy Father stated, "The Holy Shroud, the most splendid relic of the Passion and the Resurrection." Almost 10 years later, in April 1989, he was asked by reporters during an in-flight press conference on the way to Madagascar about the shroud, and he responded, "It certainly is a relic." Again, almost 10 years later, when asked if the shroud was genuine, the Pope said, "I think it is." As reported in Colombia, 1998, the Holy Father has visited the shroud both in 1978 and most recently in June 1998. His predecessors have also viewed the shroud favorably. Pope Pius XII stated, "A precious treasure, the Holy Shroud, which displays, both to move and comfort us, the image of the lifeless body and tortured face of Christ." And Pope Blessed John XXIII declared, "Digitus est hic, the finger of God is here." However, to believe that the shroud is the actual burial cloth of the Lord is not a matter of faith. No Catholic is bound to believe it is. As Cardinal Soderini of Turin stated, "It's not Christ, but something that brings us back to Him." Salvation is not in the shroud, even if it truly wrapped the martyred body of Jesus. Even if it was mysteriously given by God to His Church. Salvation is that which is given to us by Christ. Nevertheless, the Church has been the official guardian of the shroud for the House of Savoy, the former ruling family of Italy. In 1983, the Savoy family willed the shroud to the Holy Father, with the Archbishop of Turin serving as the pontifical guardian for the conservation and veneration of the Holy Shroud. Part of the uncertainty as to the authenticity of the shroud arises from its historical record. Of course, the shroud is believed to be the burial cloth used by Joseph of Arimathea to wrap the body of Jesus for burial. Documentation shows that the shroud indeed was displayed in the cities of Jerusalem, Edessa, 500, and Constantinople, 1092. King Louis VII of France venerated the shroud in Constantinople in 1147. In August 1203, Robert de Clary, a French crusader, reported seeing the shroud in Constantinople. Although some gaps appear in its historical whereabouts, the shroud has maintained a consistent presence. After Robert de Clary's testimony, the next historical sighting places the shroud in France, having passed to the possession of the de Charny family of Liéry. Probably the shroud was obtained during the Crusades and brought to Europe. The first public exhibition of the shroud, held full length, occurred in 1357, sponsored by the canons of the Cathedral of Liéry. In March 1453, Margaret de Charny gave the shroud to the House of Savoy, and it was kept at the chapel of Chambéry Castle. June 11, 1502. The shroud survived fire on December 4, 1532, but was burned at its folded corners when its silver reliquary began to melt. To date, one can see the patches applied to the shroud because of the burn marks. Finally, the shroud was moved to the Cathedral of Turin on September 14, 1578, where it has since remained in the royal chapel. During the medieval period, other supposed shrouds were reported and displayed, such as in Chambéry, France, Liège, Belgium, and Assyrial, Sicily. However, each of these was clearly a copy, produced by the artist's hand. The real scientific investigation into the shroud began in May 1898, when Secondo Pia photographed the shroud. When he was developing the film plate, he discovered that the negative image is actually the positive, and vice versa. Basically, when one looks at the shroud with the naked eye, he sees a light yellow-brownish figure of a man. But when one looks at a photographic black and white negative, he can see the image in greater detail. Pia's discovery sparked great interest in the shroud. In more recent times, extensive research has been performed on the shroud, beginning with the STURP, Shroud of Turin Research Project. team in 1978. The information presented is gleaned from a variety of sources, but an excellent book entitled The Blood of the Shroud by Ian Wilson provides the most recent and thorough presentation. As an aside, I have a special interest in the Shroud. When I was doing accounting for NASA, Drive, John Jackson from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California and who was a member of the STURP team gave a lecture on the Shroud and the scientific evidence they had gathered. Also, in May 1998, two priest friends and I went to Turin to view the Shroud, which was on exhibition. While I personally believe that the Shroud is authentic, the Church has not declared it so. And therefore, this article will refer to the image of the Shroud as that of an anonymous man rather than our Lord Jesus Christ. Yet, the parallels between the two will be noted. Here is a brief overview of the major scientific findings. The Shroud is a long, linen sheet about 4.36 meters long by 1.1 meters wide. Jesus would have been laid down on top of the Shroud, and then it would have been folded over him. Interestingly, the frontal image is a little short, and the cloth covers only part of the right foot. The Shroud is made of linen. Linen making has been known for the last 9,000 years, with Galilee being an important manufacturing center of the cloth. This cloth is also very durable. Egyptian linen wrappings on mummies at least 4,000 years old survive to this day, which means the Shroud could have been produced at the time of Christ. The weave is a herringbone pattern, with the twist of the yarn being a Z-twist, meaning the spindle was rotated clockwise. The cloth also has a high thread count, which produced a fine cloth, although such cloth was not common. It was not unusual at the time of the Lord, especially in the Middle East area. Moreover, cotton fibers particular to the kind of cotton found in Palestine are also present in the linen cloth. Pollen evidence also places the origins of the Shroud in the Middle East. Pollen, because of its outer shell, the exine, can survive literally tens of thousands of years. Drive. Max Frey of the University of Zurich and founder of the Zurich Criminal Police's Scientific Service found pollen, spores, and molds common to the habitats of the places where the Shroud had been reported. He also found pollen from helophytes, plants typical of the desert regions around the Jordan Valley and adapted to live in the soils with the high salt content found almost exclusively around the Dead Sea area. The Shroud depicts the image of a man, slightly under 6 feet tall, who suffered the brutal death of crucifixion. The wound marks evidenced by blood stains correspond with the sufferings our Lord endured as described in the Gospel. Nail wounds appear at the feet, with the sole of the right foot having a full and very bloody imprint since it was placed beneath the top of the left foot, and wrist. One hand covers the wrist of the other hand. Note that unlike most artists' depictions, the victim of crucifixion was nailed in the wrist between the radius and ulna so that he could hang securely on the cross. Nailing through the palm of the hand would not have provided such support. Interestingly, the nail at the wrist would have penetrated nerve and caused the thumb to snap into the palm. The thumbs of the man in the Shroud are hidden due to this nailing. The Shroud does show a wound to the side, as where the soldier's lance would have pierced the heart of our Lord. The spear passed through the 5th and 6th ribs, and pierced the pericardium and the right auricle, causing the flow of blood and pericardial fluid. Bloodstains around the forehead and nape of the neck could be attributed to the crown of thorns. Bloodstains also appear across the back, alternating right and left shoulders, and on the buttocks due to scourging. The scourge wounds fan out, which makes sense since the flagellum used by the Romans had 2 or 3 leather thongs with small lead balls or hooks at the end to gouge the flesh of the victim. Clearly, the victim was whipped very methodically, and over 120 wound sites are present. The blood is definitely human blood. The STURP team determined that the stains were human blood of the AB group. This finding has been corroborated by others. Professor Pierluigi Bologna, professor of medicine at the University of Turin, reported in 1978 that the blood stains were indeed human blood with traces of aloes and myrrh and belonging to the group AB. French geneticist Professor Jérôme Lejeune also concluded that the blood sample he obtained was human hemoglobin. Another intriguing point is that the blood marks on the Shroud are clear and red, not dark brown as typical of dried blood. Also, the blood stains are complete without signs of flaking off. Drive. Gilbert Lavoie suggested that what appears on the shroud is more an exudate from clotted wounds rather than whole blood. Likewise, Drive. Alan Edler explained that the torture, scourging, and crucifixion suffered by the man produced a hemolysis, breakup of red blood corpuscles, which would produce the lasting red color of the exudate. No pigments, paints, dyes, or stains have been found in the fibrils. X-ray fluorescence and microchemistry on the fibrils eliminate the possibility of paint being used as a method of creating the image, and ultraviolet and infrared evaluation have confirmed these studies. If paint had been used, it would have penetrated through the top fibers onto the lower fibers in the herringbone weave. However, the image is only on the top fibers with the lower fibers being untouched. Also, the image was resistant to bleaching and other standard chemical agents that would have reacted with paint or some other medium. Enhanced photography has also produced exciting evidence. The studies have included photographic enlargements and computer analysis of shapes, colors, and shadows. Also, a microdensitometer was used which measures very faint changes in lightness and darkness. In 1979, Father Francis L. Phyllis, S.J. of the Loyola University of Chicago, using the STIRP research, observed on the right eyelid of the man 4 letters UKI which formed a crown around the crook of an augur's staff. This image corresponds to the symbol on a small coin struck in AD 29 during the procuratorship of Pontius Pilate, AD 26 to 36. The ancient Jews used coins to hold down the eyelids. Also, Father Phyllis noted that later Byzantine coinage was engraved with an image of Christ Pantocrator which bore a striking resemblance to the facial image of the shroud, which would attest to the shroud's presence in Constantinople. In 1978, Piero Ugolotti reported that he had detected barely visible traces of letters and words in Greek, Latin, and Hebrew near the face on the shroud, which were corroborated by philologist Aldo Marastoni of the Catholic University of Milan. In 1995, scientists with the Paris Institut d'Optique also reported finding letters and words on the sides of the facial image on the shroud. An example would be in Nesum, an abbreviation of the Latin death phrase, in Nesum ibis, you will go to death, Nazarenus, Nazarene, and Pizzo, which means to accomplish in archaic Greek but in the sense of celebrating a sacrifice. The image also has unique, three-dimensional information encoded in it using a VP8 image analyzer, which NASA has used to produce pictures of planets from light signals picked up electronically and transmitted to Earth. Drive. John Jackson of the STIRP team produced a three-dimensional picture from the shroud. Note that a regular two-dimensional image, such as that of a painting or a photograph, will only produce a badly contorted image in the VP8 screen. Only when actual depth or remoteness is shown by less light does the VP8 produce a three-dimensional picture. This evidence again confirms that the shroud is not like a painting. The photographs of the shroud also seem to be like X-rays with the images of bones visible. Drive. Michael Blunt, Shalley Professor of Anatomy at the University of Sydney, noted that in the hands one can see metacarpal bones and 3 phalange bones of each finger. Professor Alan Wanger of Duke University noted that the skull is visible. Drive. Gilbert Lavoie in his recent work, Unlocking the Secrets of the Shroud, presented another intriguing discovery. The negative image of the shroud as compared with the negative images of photography reveals that the man in question had either white or light blonde hair. He noted another peculiarity: the shadows of the face and the fall of the hair indicate that the man was upright and suspended when the image was made, while the blood marks indicate the man was in the supine position on top of the cloth with the rest folded over him. Drive. Lavoie concluded that this upright image was made after the blood had stained the cloth. This finding is intellectually exciting to anyone who contemplates the possibility that this image reflects the moment of the resurrection. p. 182. The STIRP team provided the following summary of its findings. Worth noting, after a review of all of this evidence, we can conclude for now that the shroud image is that of a real human form of a scourged, crucified man. It is not the product of an artist. The blood stains are composed of hemoglobin and also give a positive test for serum albumin. The image is an ongoing mystery, and until further chemical studies are made, perhaps by this group of scientists, or perhaps by some scientist in the future,